When you think about it, it's only been about 5 years since Ubisoft brought the Prince of Persia name back and brought it into 3D. They made a whole trilogy in that time, and now they're back with a fourth game. But it doesn't feel like it's too soon for a new Prince of Persia because this is a totally new restart for the series. The gameplay that you come to Prince of Persia looking for is in place, and all the trappings around it, the story, the art, are really excellent. So this is a great new way to get back into Prince of Persia if you've been a fan for a while, and also a great standalone game on its own merits.
Hey, Ahriman! This isn't your tower anymore! This is my tower! Can I have my own tower? You know, maybe with an inscription? Nothing too fancy, just Tower of the Savior of the City of Light. Oh, and a few priestesses dedicated to its upkeep. And mine.
So this new prince, nothing like the old prince.
All right, I'll go first. But hey, no staring at my ass. I felt you looking.
I thought you'd lost your ass.
Donkey.
This new guy is more of like a Han Solo kind of figure. He goes out looking for profit, he's in it for money and women, and you know, who can blame him for that, really. But he gets tangled up with a magical princess named Elika, who's on a quest to try to basically restore beauty and splendor and life to her kingdom. Now, the old Prince of Persia games were very linear, very story-driven, pretty A to B to C. You know, you went from one area to the next, and all that travel was kind of driven by the plot points. This new Prince of Persia is much more open. You've got kind of a big map with a bunch of different nodes that represent action levels, and you can pretty much tackle these in any order you want. There are some restrictions based on 4 kind of elemental powers that you can unlock for Elika, and they're tiered in such a way that you pretty much have to access all the powers before you can get to all the levels. I really liked the open format for the most part because the levels are very different. They all look very different, they have different themes to them, so it's nice to be able to access the levels in more or less the order that you want. The downside to this openness is that you have to open these powers up to access all the different levels, and to do that you have to go back through the restored versions of each level and collect little collectibles. They're these little light orbs. And the quotas to access these new powers are actually pretty high, so I found myself backtracking a lot through levels I had already completed just to hunt down enough of these orbs to go back, open up another power, and then access more levels. The pacing could have been a little smoother here, a little less forced backtracking and item collection to get to new stuff, but it's a pretty minor blemish on what is otherwise a really solid action game.
Sure, climb on the roof. It's not like gravity ever killed anyone.
Okay, so of course it's a Prince of Persia game, so there's plenty of kind of acrobatic, gymnastic platforming action. You can run up walls, you can actually run across ceilings now, there's little rings you can swing on, there's a lot of kind of pole climbing and then angling the prince to make a really crazy, inhuman jump. That stuff feels basically the same way it did in the previous games, but it's actually gotten maybe a little too mechanical, a little too rote, because basically the prompts for what you need to do, the actions that you need to take, and the button presses that correspond to those are pretty much telegraphed to you right in the level. If there's a little kind of scraped pattern on the wall, you know you need to wall run right there. If there's a ring that you need to swing off of, you just hit B roughly around the time that you get to it. So the platforming is really not that hard to begin with, and the ease of the gameplay is actually just compounded by a new death mechanic, or I guess I should say it's actually a lack of a death mechanic, because you can't really die. Basically what happens every time you miss a jump or anything happens that normally would spell your doom in a game like this, Elika pops in with her crazy teleport powers and just grabs you and tosses you right back onto the last ledge that you stood on. So the checkpoints are super tightly packed. You never have to backtrack more than a few seconds when she saves you. It's basically just like a death mechanic without like a reload screen and a game over screen. It's just that it happens a lot quicker and you don't go back as far. So in all fairness, it's not really a hard game. If you're looking for truly challenging, skill-based gameplay, especially this kind of platforming stuff, you should probably look elsewhere. But all that stuff looks great while you're doing it. It's really flashy. It definitely gets you where you're going, and it's a lot of fun to do.
Why do you fight? That has to hurt. You want to heal this place before he finds a way back up here?
The game's designers put a lot of effort into overhauling the combat system. It's a lot different than what you've seen in the previous Prince of Persia games.
Why do you want a princess when you have a queen?
The vast majority of the combat in the game focuses on these 4 bosses. They're kind of like Ahriman's lieutenants. They're just really powerful corrupted beings that were once human. They each pop up once in every action level that is associated with their kind of realm, and it's always a really intense kind of one-on-one cinematic fight, lots of crazy camera angles. There's actually a fair amount of kind of quick time event style button pressing. Button prompt will pop up when you're about to die.
Coming in handy.
But the combo system I actually found to be really robust because there are different kinds of combos. There are sword combos, there are kind of lift combos where you can use your gauntlet to grapple a guy and throw him up in the air. Elika can do magical attacks, and the combo tree actually appears in this sort of branching format where you can do a sword pattern that will open up into like a lift combo, and you can segue that into an Elika combo, so you can actually get these really lengthy, really dramatic looking combos if you memorize enough of the button patterns and know how to chain them together. And of course, the Elika-driven no-death mechanic is also at work in the combat. Every time you die, you just get pulled away from the battle and the enemy gets a little bit of their health back. So that stuff is as streamlined and forgiving as it is in the platforming. But even though it is pretty easy, the combat looks really flashy, really stylish, visually impressive, and the combo system is really rewarding too.
I think I'm gonna wear this sword out.
As well executed as the gameplay mechanics generally are, I think it was actually the production values of this new Prince of Persia that really sold me on it. It looks absolutely stunning. All the textures have a nice hand-painted look to them. The characters have like a dark, kind of cel-shaded looking outline around them. The architecture of just the buildings and the landscapes you'll see in the levels is really fantastic, really grandiose. You get some amazing draw distances and some really cool looking castles and spires and that kind of thing off in the distance. And of course, since this is basically a reimagining of the Prince of Persia franchise, you've got a new cast of characters here. And the story, of course, revolves around basically the dynamic, the interplay between the Prince and Elika. Elika's voice actor is really good at kind of moping around and kind of conveying the gravitas that would go along with basically trying to save and restore a kind of corrupted kingdom. And then the game does a great job of also characterizing the Prince as this roguish, live-in-the-moment, irreverent kind of guy.
Any suggestions?
We need to find a way to go up.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
So of course, this game represents a new start for the Prince of Persia series, but to me the most important thing is that it's actually successful as a Prince of Persia game. It hits all the little kind of feature check marks that you would expect it to hit. You've got the wild kind of gymnastic platforming action. You've got a really beautiful, well-realized mystical world, a really engrossing and actually kind of poignant storyline that's pushing everything along, and of course, it goes right into a lead-in for the inevitable sequel. But anyway, if you've been following the Prince of Persia series for years now, or if you've never come to it at all, this one's definitely worth checking out.